Aaron Rodgers just revealed why he's finally retiring from the NFL. And based on the way he described his body, his mindset, and everything that happened behind the scenes, it's starting to sound like Rodgers felt he had no choice left. On a Wednesday afternoon at Steelers OTAs in Pittsburgh, Aaron Rodgers made it official. The 2026 NFL season will be the last of his career, delivering 3 blunt words that ended years of retirement speculation once and for all. Yes, this is it. Standing in front of the press, the 4-time MVP didn't dress the announcement up with fanfare or sentiment. He confirmed what had been building for years: the clock is done. Rodgers, 42, spent more than 4 months deciding whether to return for a 22nd NFL season, before he signed a 1-year contract Monday to return to Pittsburgh for his 2nd season with the Steelers. That's 4 months, from January through May, of weighing whether his body could take another year of punishment. The 4-time NFL MVP signed a 1-year contract worth up to $25 million with the Steelers this week, reuniting with coach Mike McCarthy. But here's the part that cuts deeper. Rodgers acknowledged that he thought his time in Pittsburgh, and perhaps the league, was over when Steelers coach Mike Tomlin stepped down the day after a blowout first-round playoff loss to Houston in January. That wild-card game against the Texans wasn't just a loss. In the Steelers' playoff loss to the Houston Texans, Rodgers played poorly, completing 17 passes out of 33 attempts for 146 yards, getting sacked 4 times for 36 yards, and throwing a pick-6, a 30-6 beating at home, in what everyone assumed would be the final game of his career. He simply doesn't have the same magic that made him one of the league's best to ever do it. One of his top strengths throughout his future Hall of Fame career is his ability to scramble and dance around in and outside of the pocket to create throwing lanes and big plays. However, with limited mobility in his 40s, the magic is slipping away. This is a quarterback whose entire identity was built on extending plays, buying time, and threading the needle in windows that shouldn't exist. On 3rd downs in 2025, Rodgers surrendered a sack rate of 10.7%, the 10th highest in the entire NFL. And that brings us to the part nobody in the NFL wants to say out loud. Was Aaron Rodgers choosing to walk away? Or was he being told in every possible way that the game had moved past him? There was some doubt for sure, Rodgers said, of returning. He wasn't sure he should come back. His body wasn't sure it could come back. And his last game in 2025 made a case that maybe, just maybe, the game was making that decision for him. To understand how one of the most gifted quarterbacks in history reached this point, you have to go back to the beginning, back to a kid from Chico, California, who never should have made it this far in the first place. To say his Hall of Fame-worthy career was surprising would be a dramatic understatement. After high school in Chico, California, Rodgers attended Butte College, a junior college that was multiple rungs lower than major college football. His success at Butte led him to Berkeley, where he starred at California, and became viewed as a first-round draft talent in the NFL. Consider that trajectory. Most future Hall of Fame quarterbacks come from powerhouse college programs: USC, Alabama, Clemson. Rodgers came from Butte Community College. He transferred to Cal, where he showed enough to get invited to the 2005 NFL Draft as a projected top pick. But draft night turned into one of the most excruciating televised moments in football history. On draft night in 2005, with cameras trained on him as he tried to maintain his composure, Rodgers sat in a green room for hours as 22 teams passed on him, before Green Bay selected him 24th overall. 22 teams. The cameras stayed locked on his face, broadcasting every uncomfortable second. As name after name was called and his wasn't, the San Francisco 49ers, his hometown team, took Alex Smith with the 1st overall pick instead. That night branded a chip onto Rodgers' shoulder that, by many accounts, never fully came off. For the next 3 years, he was an understudy to Favre, a Hall of Famer, before he took over as the Packers starter in 2008 at age 25. 3 full seasons sitting behind Brett Favre, learning, watching, waiting, when Favre's own retirement saga finally played out. Favre's retirement announcement on March 4, 2008 opened up the Packers' starting quarterback position to Rodgers for the 2008 season. Although Favre decided to return from retirement, he was traded to the New York Jets, which meant that Rodgers would become the starter. And from the moment Rodgers stepped onto the field as QB1, there was no mistaking the talent. Rodgers quickly proved that he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league by passing for 4,438 yards in his first season as a starter. as well as throwing for 28 touchdowns and only 13 interceptions. The doubts from draft night. The years on the bench, they melted away under the sheer volume of his arm talent and football intelligence. The crown jewel came in February 2011. His Super Bowl XLV triumph over the Steelers in February 2011 remains one of the most dominant individual performances in championship history. There's a twist of irony buried in there that almost feels like fiction. Rodgers won his Super Bowl by beating the Pittsburgh Steelers, the very franchise he would sign with 14 years later in the twilight of his career. Rodgers was named the most valuable player of the Super Bowl during the Packers' victory, to cap the 2011 season, when he was also named the league's most valuable player. He went on to win the award again in 2014, 2020, and 2021, with his 4 wins second only to Peyton Manning all time. Between 2008 and 2021, Aaron Rodgers wasn't just good, he was the standard, the level of quarterback play that everyone else in the league was measured against. He enters the 2026 season as the NFL's all-time leader in both passer rating, at 102.2 and touchdown-to-interception ratio at 4.3. with 527 career touchdown passes ranking him 4th all-time. When you're first all-time in passer rating and you own the best touchdown-to-interception ratio ever, the numbers aren't just impressive. They represent a standard of precision and decision-making that no one has matched over a sustained period. Despite attempting 8,743 passes, 6th most in league history, he threw interceptions on only 1.4% of them, a percentage that ties for the best all-time. The man threw the football nearly 9,000 times and barely gave it away. That kind of efficiency over that kind of volume is the definition of greatness. But greatness doesn't protect you from the thing every athlete fears the most, the relentless, grinding, inescapable reality of getting older. And for Aaron Rodgers, that reckoning hit harder and faster than anyone expected. The beginning of the end can be traced to a single play. September 11, 2023. Monday Night Football. The New York Jets versus the Buffalo Bills. Rodgers was making his highly anticipated debut as a member of the Jets, but just 4 plays into the season opener against the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football, he suffered a torn left Achilles. 4 plays, that's all he got. After an entire offseason of hype, the blockbuster trade from Green Bay, the renewed energy, the promise of a contender, it was all demolished in a matter of seconds. Rodgers was sacked by Bills linebacker Leonard Floyd, and despite initial reports suggesting he had suffered an ankle injury, it was confirmed to be an Achilles tear shortly after. The emotional fallout was catastrophic. Aaron Rodgers' initial reaction to the 2023 Achilles injury that ended his first campaign in New York after 4 plays was to believe his career was over. "I was really thinking, this is it. You don't come back from this injury," Rodgers said during an interview on the I Can Fly podcast. At 40 years old, a torn Achilles is the kind of injury that puts most careers into a coffin and nails it shut. The recovery timeline is brutal. The odds of returning to elite form at that age are essentially 0. But Rodgers refused to accept the verdict. NFL media reports that Rodgers is rehabbing more than 5 hours a day, with the goal of returning to play this season. 5 hours a day. The intensity of that rehabilitation speaks to the kind of obsessive drive that had defined his career from the beginning. Rodgers would famously attempt a mid-season comeback from the Achilles tear, and was even activated off the injured reserve late in the season. But once the Jets were officially eliminated from postseason contention, the dream of his historic return was ended. He came back for 2024, playing through what turned into a nightmarish season in New York. He then joined the New York Jets for 2023 and 2024, losing the first season due to injury and going 5-12 in the second, before signing with Pittsburgh last year. A 5-12 record for a 4-time MVP, that's not just a bad season. That's a statement from the football gods that things have fundamentally changed. During that 2024 campaign, the physical deterioration became impossible to ignore. During their bye week, it was revealed that Rodgers had been playing through hamstring, knee, and ankle injuries, but had refused to get scans done in fear of how severe they would be. He was playing through a constellation of injuries: hamstring, knee, ankle, and he was actively avoiding medical imaging because he didn't want to know how bad things really were. That's the definition of a body sending signals that the mind refuses to receive. After 2 forgettable years in New York with the Jets, he had an up-and-down first campaign in Pittsburgh last year, throwing for 3,322 yards with 24 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. In a restricted offense, The move to Pittsburgh in 2025 represented a fresh start, and in some ways it delivered. The numbers were respectable on the surface, but dig beneath the stats and the erosion was unmistakable. On the other side of the coin, Rodgers ranked just 21st among those 33 qualified quarterbacks in EPA per dropback. His 6.7 yards per attempt ranked 27th, while his 6.37-yard average depth of target ranked 42nd among 45 quarterbacks to attempt at least 100 passes. Those advanced metrics told the real story. Rodgers was throwing short, playing safe, and producing at a below-average rate per throw. The arm was still there, technically, but the explosiveness and ability to stretch the field vertically had faded to a whisper. And then came the wildcard game, the final confirmation that time had won, January 12, 2026. Acrisure Stadium, the AFC wildcard round. Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Houston Texans. This was supposed to be the triumphant next chapter. The veteran leading his team deeper into the postseason, perhaps crafting one more memorable run. Instead, it became the night that convinced nearly everyone watching, including perhaps Rodgers himself, that the game had passed him by. In the Steelers' playoff loss to the Houston Texans, Rodgers played poorly, completing 17 passes out of 33 attempts for 146 yards, getting sacked 4 times for 36 yards, and throwing a pick 6. Those are staggering numbers from a 4-time MVP. 17 completions on 33 attempts, a pick 6 that Houston ran back for a touchdown, 4 sacks from a pass rush that had no trouble finding him in the pocket. The Texans won 30-6, a 24-point blowout on Rodgers' home turf. What made Rodgers transcendent for most of his career was his ability to manipulate the pocket, extend plays, and find receivers in coverage that would stop most quarterbacks cold. That same mobility, however, has been slowly eroded by age. On third downs in 2025, he surrendered a sack rate of 10.7%, the 10th highest mark in the entire NFL. The limitations were at their starkest in a 30-6 wildcard loss to the Houston Texans in January. The Texans' pass rush, led by Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter, treated Rodgers like a stationary target. The scrambling ability that once made him one of the most dangerous playmakers in football history was gone, and what remained was a 42-year-old man standing flat-footed in a collapsing pocket. The aftermath was devastating in a way that went beyond the scoreboard. After the loss, Mike Tomlin, who had been the Steelers' head coach for 19 years, stepped down. The entire coaching infrastructure that had brought Rodgers to Pittsburgh dissolved overnight. On Wednesday, Rodgers suggested that he was prepared to ride off into the sunset of retirement. Before the Steelers hired Mike McCarthy as Tomlin's replacement this past winter, McCarthy was Rodgers' coach when the two were with the Green Bay Packers. From 2006 through much of the 2018 season, Rodgers was ready to walk away. The wild-card humiliation had been the final punctuation mark on a narrative that had been building for years. His body was telling him to stop. The numbers were telling him to stop. And now his coach, the man who had recruited him to Pittsburgh, was stepping aside. But then something unexpected happened. Things changed when Pittsburgh hired Mike McCarthy a few weeks later, a decision that Rodgers said he may have played a small role in when he encouraged Steelers general manager Omar Khan to talk to McCarthy. The Steelers hired Mike McCarthy, and Rodgers didn't just welcome the hire, he had actively pushed for it. "I encouraged him for an outside perspective to interview Mike," Rodgers said. The man who was supposedly done playing football was behind the scenes engineering the very scenario that would pull him back. That tension between a body in decline and a competitive spirit that refuses to concede is at the very heart of this retirement story. So was Aaron Rodgers forced to retire? The word forced requires a careful unpacking, because nobody walked into a room and handed him a termination letter. But when you examine the full scope of circumstances surrounding this announcement, the picture becomes far more complicated than a simple personal decision. A new report suggests something deeply personal could have him lean toward retirement. Rodgers, who turned 42 in December, does not have any children. However, that could change now that he's a married man. Reports emerged earlier in the offseason that Rodgers was weighing fatherhood against football. According to the Daily Mail, the quarterback is weighing fatherhood before deciding whether to return to play in 2026. His wife, whose identity he has kept fiercely private, was part of the conversation. However, after discussions with Khan, McCarthy, and his wife, he decided to return for this final season, his 22nd in the NFL, making the call after the NFL draft. The physical toll cannot be overstated. This is a man who tore his Achilles in 2023, played through hamstring, knee, and ankle injuries in 2024, fractured his left wrist during the 2025 season, and watched his mobility disintegrate to the point where he became one of the most sacked quarterbacks on third downs in the entire league. During the second quarter of the Steelers' Week 11 victory over the Cincinnati Bengals, Rodgers suffered a small fracture in his left wrist. The fracture cost him a start, and while he returned, it added another mark to the growing ledger of damage his body was absorbing. Even the analysts projecting the 2026 season are framing it around the physical limitations of a man entering his 43rd year. Aaron Rodgers' 42-year-old body should be aching pretty good by then, a writer noted. The Steelers themselves provided a subtle but undeniable signal about the future, while McCarthy and Rodgers stayed in constant communication, as Rodgers hung out in Malibu, California, with his wife and weighed his options for 2026. The Steelers selected Penn State quarterback Drew Allar in the third round of the draft, and McCarthy has talked up 2025 sixth-round choice Will Howard at every turn since taking over. They drafted Drew Allar, they elevated Will Howard, they built the succession plan while Rodgers was still deciding whether to play. The writing wasn't just on the wall, it was painted across the building in stadium-sized letters. Rodgers chose to come back to both football and the Steelers in 2026. To finish out his career with new Pittsburgh head coach Mike McCarthy, his head coach of 13 seasons with the Green Bay Packers. Their reunion will make them the first quarterback head coach duo to win a Super Bowl together. Before joining forces again on a new team, Rodgers, 42, called it a full circle moment to be able to play for McCarthy again. Honestly, sitting in the first 8 o'clock meeting on Monday took me back to being a 22-year-old kid sitting in Green Bay, listening to Mike's first meeting in 2006, Rodgers said. But even McCarthy, while enthusiastically welcoming Rodgers back, structured the roster around life after number 8. Allar and Howard will get to spend the next 7 or so months soaking up what they can from Rodgers, about what McCarthy wants, and perhaps more importantly, how he wants it. McCarthy called Rodgers a tremendous resource who also happens to be a future Hall of Famer. Rodgers is being positioned as part mentor, part player, the transitional figure who bridges the gap between Pittsburgh's present and its future. Rodgers, who turns 43 in December, will be the oldest player in the NFL for his 22nd and final season. When Rodgers takes the field for the 2026 season, he'll be the oldest player in the entire league. When he turns 43 years old on December 2, he'll become the 6th quarterback in NFL history to start a game at the age of 43 or older. Only 5 quarterbacks in the entire history of the NFL have started a game at age 43 or older. The air is thin up there, and the historical precedent for sustained success is almost non-existent. So was he forced to retire? Not in the traditional sense. Nobody cut him. Nobody benched him. Nobody told him he couldn't play anymore. But the accumulation of forces, a battered body that has endured broken collarbones, a ruptured Achilles, fractured wrists, and chronic lower body ailments. A league that has drafted his replacement while he was still deciding whether to play. A wildcard game that exposed the gap between who he was and who he is. The pull of fatherhood and a life beyond football, and the simple, unforgiving math of being a 42-year-old man competing against athletes in their physical prime. These forces didn't leave him with much of a choice. It's a more direct statement than Rodgers gave a year ago, when he said in June that he was pretty sure 2025 would be his final crusade. He didn't leave as much wiggle room on Wednesday. Last year, he said he was pretty sure it was over. This year, there's no wiggle room, no equivocation, no maybe. Bookending his 22-year run under the same coach who helped usher in his Hall of Fame career, appealed to Rodgers. In the end, the story of Aaron Rodgers' retirement is the story of a man who found the one scenario: a reunion with McCarthy, a roster built to compete, a full-circle narrative that gave him a reason to face the music one final time. The 2026 season will be his farewell tour, a victory lap through the stadiums that watched him rewrite the record books. And when the clock hits 0 on his final game, whenever that may be, the NFL will lose a quarterback who is tied for first all-time in passer rating, 4th in passing touchdowns, and 5th in passing yards. A player whose talent was so extraordinary that it took 2 decades and every physical limitation the human body can produce to finally make him stop. Aaron Rodgers wasn't handed a pink slip. He was handed a mirror. And for the first time in 22 years, he didn't like what looked back at him.